Orange juice disaster. Flora navigated the first-class cabin, the drink cart a smooth extension of herself. A welcome stillness prevailed, a luxury that allowed her to savor the small joys of her profession. Hushed conversations, the delicate chime of crystal, and fleeting panoramas glimpsed through expansive windows. A near-empty cabin added to the day's appeal, just 6 souls nestled in the plush, ivory seats. She paused at Mr. Henderson's elbow, a faithful patron with a penchant for pre-noon scotch. "The usual, sir." He acknowledged her with a smile, wrinkles radiating from his kind eyes. "You know my habits too well, Flora." As she poured the golden liquor, a shrill giggle pierced the calm. At 1A, Thomas Sterling, a miniature tyrant of 4, was attempting an encore performance of his in-seat acrobatics. "Thomas, darling, please be seated," his mother urged, her tone a practiced blend of sweetness and thinly veiled exasperation. "You'll tumble." Flora suppressed a sigh. She'd faced far worse airborne antics, but something about this particular child rubbed her the wrong way. Perhaps it was his imperious gaze, a tiny potentate surveying his floating kingdom. Duties with Mr. Henderson completed, including the retrieval of his prior glass, she braced herself for the inevitable encounter with the Sterling duo. Orange juice was the requested weapon of choice for Thomas. "Good morning, Mrs. Sterling," Flora greeted, forcing a pleasant facade. "And good morning, Thomas." Enjoying the journey. Mid-squirm, Thomas leveled a flinty stare at her. "No, I want a treat." Mrs. Sterling offered a theatrical sigh. "Thomas, remember our deal? Cookie after juice." Flora poured the juice, a vibrant cascade of citrus that filled the glass. Extending it to Thomas, she found him engrossed in a battle with his seatbelt. "Here you are, sweetie. Careful now." Then, in a flash, it all went sideways. The moment Thomas wrestled free from the buckle, he lunged, colliding directly with Flora. The glass escaped her hold, launching a sticky, tangerine arc that found its target, Thomas's immaculate white polo shirt. A beat of stunned silence filled the air. Flora's smile evaporated, replaced by a wince. Mrs. Sterling's intake of breath was audible. Then the dam burst. Thomas Sterling unleashed a banshee wail that reverberated through the cabin. Tears streamed down his face, tracing paths through the bright rivulets of juice. He thrashed, his small feet drumming against the seat ahead. "My shirt. It's ruined. I hate this drink." Mrs. Sterling's efforts to soothe him were immediately overwhelmed. "Thomas, darling, it's only a bit of juice. We can clean it off." "No, I want a new one. I want to go home." The cries escalated into full-fledged hysteria. Mortified, Flora grabbed a wad of napkins and knelt. "I'm so very sorry," she apologized, her voice taut. "Let me help you clean up." Thomas recoiled as if burned, swatting her hands away with surprising force. "Go away. You're bad." Other passengers were now observing with varying degrees of irritation and amusement, their polite murmurs extinguished. Heat bloomed in Flora's cheeks. This was spiraling. "Thomas, stop this instant." Mrs. Sterling's voice lost its saccharine coating, becoming sharp. Turning to Flora, her eyes narrowed. "Orange juice? Really? Couldn't you have been a tad more careful?" Flora's fragile composure began to crack. "I said I was sorry." He lunged forward. The words emerged with unintended bite. She regretted them instantly. Sensing an opening, Thomas ramped up the theatrics. The screams intensified, becoming a relentless assault. He kicked Flora's shin, a sharp, stinging blow. "Thomas!" Mrs. Sterling seized his arm, but the damage had been done. Flora, her reserves of patience depleted, rose abruptly, her face flushed. "I'll get you a new shirt," she offered, her voice barely audible. Turning sharply, she stalked toward the galley, the image of Thomas's juice-drenched face etched into her thoughts. It promised to be a very long flight indeed. Tantrum in the sky. The kicking started subtly, rhythmic thumps against Flora's shin as she knelt beside Thomas. She ignored it initially, attributing it to pent-up energy. "Okay, sweetie, we're almost there. Just a little bit longer, and we can have some juice, okay?" But the thumps intensified, escalating into full-blown kicks. He was screaming now, a high-pitched wail that bounced off the plush interior of the first-class cabin. I want my tablet. I want it now. Flora's smile felt strained, glued to her face. Thomas, honey, you can have your tablet when we land. We talked about this. Remember the screen rules. No, I want it now. He punctuated his demand with a particularly vicious kick that landed squarely on Flora's already aching ankle. A ripple of unease spread through the cabin. The gentle hum of the plane was now competing with Thomas's shrieks. A businessman with impeccably styled silver hair lowered his newspaper, peering over the rim of his glasses. A woman in a Chanel suit sighed dramatically, pulling out noise-canceling headphones, though Flora suspected she was still listening. Flora took a deep breath, the recycled air doing little to calm her frayed nerves. She tried reasoning. Thomas, think about all the fun things we can do when we land. We can go to the park, get ice cream. It was useless. His face was blotchy, tears streaming down his cheeks, spittle flying with each shriek. Tablet, tablet, tablet. He was now thrashing in his seat, small fists flailing. The Chanel suit woman finally snapped. Good heavens! Can't you control that child? This is simply unacceptable. Flora whipped around, her own patience wearing thin. I'm doing my best, ma'am. She turned back to Thomas, grabbing his flailing hands. Thomas, stop it. You're disturbing everyone. That seemed to only fuel his tantrum. He arched his back, screaming even louder, his small body rigid with anger. The businessman cleared his throat loudly. Perhaps some disciplinary action is in order? A timeout, perhaps. Flora glared at him. Sir, I hardly think a timeout is feasible at 30,000 feet. The noise was attracting more attention. Heads were turning, whispers circulating. Flora felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. This was going from bad to worse. Desperate, she reached for the small bag of airline-approved toys she kept for emergencies. She pulled out a small, plush airplane, hoping it would distract him. Look, Thomas, it's just like our plane. He batted it away with surprising force. It bounced off the armrest and landed on the floor. I don't want that stupid plane. I want my tablet. Flora felt a surge of anger, hot and sharp. Years of customer service training battled with her rising frustration. She was exhausted, her feet hurt, and this screaming child was pushing her to her limit. Before she could stop herself, she acted. In a move she would immediately regret, Flora slapped Thomas across the face. Not hard, not with the intention to hurt, but a sharp, stinging slap nonetheless. Silence. The screaming stopped. Thomas stared at her, his eyes wide with shock. The entire cabin seemed to hold its breath. Flora's hand flew to her mouth. Oh God, what had she done? Tears welled in Thomas's eyes, and a whimper escaped his lips. Then, a fresh wave of wails erupted, louder and more heartbreaking than before. But this time it was different. This time, it was born of genuine pain and confusion. Flora's heart shattered. She had crossed a line, a big, bright, flashing neon line. She knelt down, reaching for him, her voice trembling. Thomas, I am so sorry. I didn't mean to, but it was too late. The damage was done. The Chanel suit woman was already reaching for her phone, her face a mask of righteous indignation. I am reporting this. This is outrageous. The impulsive act. The miniature demon shrieked again, a banshee wail that bounced off the polished chrome and hushed leather of first class. Flora plastered on what she hoped was a serene smile, pushing the drink cart a little faster. She needed to reach Mrs. van der Linde with her herbal tea before the poor woman spontaneously combusted from sheer irritation. I want the cookie. I want it now. Thomas Sterling's face was the color of an overripe tomato, tears carving clean streaks through the grime coating his cheeks. He kicked the plush leather seat in front of him, the thud a jarring counterpoint to the muzak drifting from the speakers. Flora knelt, her knees protesting. Thomas, sweetheart, your mommy said you could have the cookie after dinner. Remember? No. Now. He punctuated his demand with a fist that connected, not gently, with Flora's arm. It stung. The smile wavered, threatened to crack. She'd dealt with tantrums before, screaming babies, airsick teenagers, but something about this kid, this relentless, entitled rage, was pushing her to the edge. "Thomas," she said, her voice tighter than she intended, "that's not nice. We don't hit." He hit her again, harder this time, a childish reflex, born of frustration and a complete lack of discipline. Something snapped. Before she could think, before she could even register the act as a conscious decision, her hand lashed out. It wasn't a full-blown slap, not exactly. More of a sharp, stinging tap to the back of his hand, enough to startle him. The effect was immediate and devastating. Thomas gasped, his eyes widening in stunned disbelief. The screaming stopped, choked off in his throat. Then the silence. It descended like a suffocating blanket, heavy and absolute. The muzak seemed to falter, then died altogether, leaving only the low hum of the engines and the frantic thumping of Flora's own heart. Every head in first class swiveled. Mrs. Van Derlen's teacup rattled in its saucer. Even the businessman glued to his laptop screen looked up, his brow furrowed in disapproval. Flora stared at Thomas, her hands still outstretched, hovering in the air. Horror bloomed in her chest, cold and sharp. What had she done? Years of training, of careful customer service, of smiling through the worst passenger behavior, undone in a single, impulsive act. He wasn't crying. Not yet. He was simply staring at her, his expression a mixture of shock and betrayal that twisted something deep inside Flora. She wanted to take it back, rewind the last 5 seconds, erase her reaction from existence. His lower lip trembled. You hit me," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Oh," Thomas saw Flora's voice caught. She reached for him, wanting to soothe, to apologize, but he flinched away, shrinking back against the leather. The businessman cleared his throat, a loud, pointed sound. Mrs. Van Derlen gasped, clutching her pearls. The air crackled with unspoken judgment. Flora's mind raced, searching for an escape, a plausible explanation, anything to diffuse the situation. But there was nothing. She had crossed a line, a bright, glaring, unforgivable line. She sank to her knees again, forcing herself to meet Thomas's gaze. "I'm so sorry, Thomas. I didn't mean to. I shouldn't have done that." The words sounded hollow, inadequate. Still, Thomas stared, his eyes wide and unblinking. He didn't understand. He couldn't understand. He was 4 years old, and Flora had just made the biggest mistake of her life. Whispers of authority, the recycled air, heavy and stale, pressed in on Flora, each breath a monumental effort. Thomas's wails had given way to shuddering gasps, his small face a roadmap of red blotches. Mrs. Abernathy, the elderly woman from 2B, leaned in, her voice a gravelly rasp that amplified Flora's growing dread. "That boy," she began, her gaze flicking toward the front where a nanny fussed over Thomas. "That's Thomas Sterling. Surely you know." Flora, still stinging from the slap, managed a strained, "Yes, I do." "And you know whose son he is, dear?" A glint of amusement sparked in Mrs. Abernathy's eyes. Flora frowned. "A VIP client, I'm guessing?" SkyVista fawned over its first-class passengers without fail. The woman's voice dropped to a clandestine murmur. "Important is an understatement. His father is Mr. Sterling. The Mr. Sterling, SkyVista CEO." The world lurched beneath Flora's feet. The color fled her face, leaving it cold and damp. CEO? An image of Mr. Sterling, all severe angles and bespoke suits, a man renowned for his unyielding approach, filled her mind. She'd only ever seen him in corporate addresses, his voice resonating with power. That man fathered Thomas? Her pulse hammered in her ears, a panic tattoo against her ribs. She hadn't just slapped a spoiled child. She'd slapped the heir apparent. "Oh, God," she whispered, the words barely audible. Mrs. Abernathy patted her hand, her gaze a disconcerting blend of pity and malicious glee. "Didn't know, eh? These things happen. But mark my words, my dear, this won't be easily dismissed. Not with him involved." Flora's thoughts spiraled. Termination, litigation, professional ruin. The carefully constructed life she'd painstakingly built over years of struggle teetered on the brink of collapse. She envisioned her small apartment, finally within reach, vanishing. She saw her long-held dream of a vacation for her mother evaporating like mist. She imagined Mr. Sterling's glacial stare as he delivered the news, his words clipped and devoid of empathy. She pictured the legal team, their faces impassive, their questions like sharpened knives. The whispers, the stares, the stigma, a suffocating tide threatening to engulf her. She had to act. Offer a groveling apology? Plead for leniency? But what words could possibly mend the damage, nullify the impact of her impulsive act? The prospect of facing Mr. Sterling, of abasing herself before him, turned her stomach. Thomas was still hiccuping, his nanny now attempting to placate him with a tablet. He looked up, their eyes meeting briefly. A spark of defiance, of ingrained privilege, flickered in his gaze. The gall. He'd been behaving despicably, a miniature tyrant, but none of that mattered now. Only his pedigree. Flora's hands trembled uncontrollably. She needed clarity, urgently, but her mind was a chaotic storm of fear and remorse, each thought colliding with the next. She needed a plan, a strategy, anything to salvage this disaster. Yet, as she looked at Thomas, a surge of indignation coursed through her. He was a child, undeniably, but one accustomed to unwavering deference, a child who would likely face no lasting consequences for his actions. And she, Flora Hernandez, who had clawed her way to stability, was about to lose everything because of him. The sheer injustice of it stung, a bitter acid on her tongue. A failed apology. The aroma of warm chocolate chip cookies hung heavy in the air, a stark contrast to the icy silence emanating from seat 1A. Flora knelt, offering the plate to Thomas. I got these from the galley. Freshly baked. Want one? Thomas, perched stiffly on the plush leather, didn't even glance at the cookies. His lower lip trembled, but no tears fell. He simply stared, a miniature gargoyle carved from resentment. No, he finally spat, the word sharp enough to cut glass. Flora forced a smile. Okay, more for me, then. She took a cookie, exaggerating her enjoyment, hoping to coax him. The chocolate was gooey, the dough soft, but the sweetness felt like ashes in her mouth. I also found this coloring book. Lots of dinosaurs. Remember you like dinosaurs? She held it out, the pages rustling softly. Again, the cold, unwavering stare. I don't want it. Helplessness washed over Flora, a suffocating wave. Every carefully chosen word, every peace offering, bounced off him like pebbles against a fortress wall. She felt the eyes of the other first-class passengers on her, judging, waiting. Even the gentle hum of the aircraft seemed to amplify the oppressive silence. She set the cookies and the coloring book on the empty seat beside him. Well, they're here if you change your mind. She straightened, her knees protesting the cramped space. Is there anything else I can get you, Thomas? He blinked, and for a fleeting moment, Flora thought she saw a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a hardened, adult-like distrust that chilled her to the bone. You can go away, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Flora's heart sank. She wanted to scoop him up, hug him, tell him she was sorry, truly sorry. But she knew any such gesture would only be met with further rejection, perhaps even another tantrum. The fragile truce she desperately sought was simply unattainable. She backed away slowly, feeling like a pariah. All right, Thomas. I'll be right over there if you need anything. She pointed towards the galley, a pathetic attempt to reassure him. As she retreated, she caught the eye of a woman across the aisle, a silent question hanging in the air. Flora offered a weak, apologetic smile, but the woman's expression remained impassive. Flora reached the galley, her hands trembling. Leaning against the cool metal counter, she closed her eyes, fighting back tears. The metallic tang of the stainless steel filled her nostrils, a stark reminder of her failure. She had made things worse. Much worse. The apology, carefully constructed in her mind, had crumbled into dust. Thomas was more withdrawn, more distrustful than before. She glanced back at Thomas. He hadn't touched the cookies or the coloring book. He was staring out the window, his small face pressed against the glass, lost in a world she couldn't reach. The vast expanse of sky mirrored the chasm that now separated them, a chasm she had created with a single, reckless act. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. Another text from Marco, no doubt. She ignored it, unable to face the reality of her situation. The CEO's son, a broken apology, and a career hanging by a thread. The flight had only just begun, and Flora felt like she was already plummeting. The kind stranger. The stale, recirculated air hung heavy as Flora slumped into the jump seat, the plastic digging into the back of her thighs. The weight of her actions pressed down on her, a suffocating blanket woven from regret and fear. The murmurs of the other passengers faded into a dull roar, a soundtrack to her impending doom. A gentle cough broke through her fog. An elderly man with kind eyes and a neatly trimmed silver beard sat a few rows ahead. He offered her a small, reassuring smile, a silent acknowledgement of the tense atmosphere. He was dressed in a tweed jacket, the scent of old books and lavender clinging to him. Flora managed a weak smile in return. She didn't recognize him, but there was something about his calm demeanor that eased the frantic drumming in her chest, if only slightly. As the other flight attendants bustled about, preparing for takeoff, the man unbuckled his seatbelt and shuffled towards her. "Excuse me, dear," he said, his voice a low, soothing rumble. "I couldn't help but notice you seem a bit distressed." Flora swallowed hard, her throat suddenly dry. "It's nothing, sir. Just a long day." He settled into the seat beside her, his movements slow and deliberate. Long days can be trying, especially when they involve little ones. "I used to work with children, you see." The words hung in the air, laden with unspoken understanding. Flora's gaze darted around the cabin, paranoid, but no one seemed to be paying them any attention. I made a mistake," she confessed, the words tumbling out in a rush. "A big one. With that boy, with Mr. SkyVista's son." His expression didn't change, remaining gentle and non-judgmental. "Children can be challenging," he said, choosing his words carefully. "And sometimes, our reactions don't always reflect our best selves." Flora felt a tear prick at the corner of her eye. "I know that's no excuse. I lost my temper. It was unprofessional, and now I'm going to lose my job." The image of her mother, her warm kitchen filled with the aroma of home-baked bread, flashed in her mind. She sent money home. What would they do? He patted her hand lightly, his touch surprisingly firm. "It's clear you regret what happened. That's the first step. Now, the important thing is to think about how to address it." He paused, his eyes twinkling with wisdom. "My name is Arthur Abernathy, by the way. I was a child psychologist before I retired." A child psychologist. Of all the people on this plane, she'd ended up sitting next to a retired child psychologist. The irony wasn't lost on her. "Flora Hernandez," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "And I'm about to be a former flight attendant." "Nonsense," Arthur said, his voice surprisingly firm. "One mistake doesn't define you, Flora. It's what you do next that matters. Have you considered speaking with the boy's father directly?" Flora shuddered. "Are you kidding? He looked like he wanted to rip me apart." "Perhaps," Arthur conceded, "but sometimes a genuine apology, offered with sincerity, can soften even the hardest heart, especially when it comes to their children." He leaned back in his seat as the plane began a taxi. "Think about it, Flora. You have a long flight ahead of you. Use the time to consider your options. And remember," he added with a wink, "even the most turbulent flights eventually land." The plane lurched forward, and Flora fastened her seatbelt, Arthur's words echoing in her ears. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a glimmer of hope, a sliver of a chance that she could salvage this mess. But the idea of facing Mr. SkyVista again sent another jolt of fear through her. It seemed like an impossible task. The paper airplane solution. A paper airplane? Flora voiced the question, the notion ludicrous even to her. Mr. Abernathy's smile deepened, carving a web of kind lines around his eyes. Sometimes, the most unassuming approach proves most effective. It disarms. It's playful, allowing the message to land without the burden of expectation. He brought his fingertips together. Children, especially those who feel overlooked, respond to symbolic gestures. Doubt lingered, yet desperation outweighed her skepticism. The retirement home window offered back the image of a woman teetering on the precipice. What sort of message exactly? Sincerity, came the simple reply. An apology, acknowledgement of his hurt. No justifications, no excuses, just understanding. Back in her cramped apartment, the idea still struck her as far-fetched. Yet, she couldn't banish the memory of Thomas's stricken, tear-streaked face. Guilt clawed at her conscience. From a drawer, she retrieved a sheet of pristine stationery, expensive and used stock that now felt like her last chance. Slowly, deliberately, she folded the paper, focusing on each fold, each precise angle. This wasn't merely a paper airplane. It was a courier of remorse. Her normally fumbling fingers moved with surprising grace, striving for a streamlined design. With the basic form complete, she paused. The stark white felt too clinical. She unearthed long-dormant colored pencils, relics from her childhood. With a wavering hand, she sketched a cheerful sun on one wing, a fluffy cloud on the other. Then, she added a minute, cartoonish version of herself, offering an apologetic wave. Childish, perhaps absurd, yet somehow right. Finally, the words. With meticulous care, she printed a succinct message along the fuselage. Dear Thomas, I am so incredibly sorry. I never meant to cause you pain. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me. The signature, simply Flora. Silence filled the apartment, punctuated only by the refrigerator's monotonous hum. Flora cradled the paper airplane, feeling the weight of her hopes and anxieties pressed into its fragile shape. Pathetic, this meager offering, against the towering might of SkyVista. But it was all she possessed. She envisioned the Sterling home's immaculate perfection, the nannies, the lavish toys. Would a paper airplane even register in such a world? Still, she had to make the attempt. The following morning, frantic calls to human resources revealed that Mr. SkyVista and his son were scheduled to depart on a private flight from a smaller airfield just outside the city. She gleaned the location. A desperate gamble, but she had to try. Flora coaxed her aging Corolla down the highway, the engine protesting every inch. The sky was a canvas of bruised purples, threatening a downpour. Sweat slicked her palms. Each mile devoured felt like a step closer to redemption or utter devastation. Nearing the airfield, she spotted the gleaming SkyVista jet, poised and ready. Security was formidable. Chain-link fences, crowned with razor wire, ringed the perimeter. No possibility of getting close enough to deliver her message. Despair threatened to drown her. She steered the car to the roadside, her hands shaking uncontrollably. She gripped the paper airplane, its edges already softening in the damp air. This was it. This was where everything crumbled. Then she saw him. Thomas. He stood beside the jet, a tiny figure dwarfed by the massive aircraft. He clutched a well-loved bear, gazing up at the sky, his expression unreadable. Flora drew a deep breath, restarted the Corolla, and crept slowly along the perimeter fence, searching for a breach, any avenue. Forgiveness takes flight. Flora sank to her knees, proffering the origami plane, her hands a-quiver. Here, Thomas. I made this. Cabin lights bounced off the paper's pristine surface, accentuating each precise fold of its diminutive wings. A meager offering, a flimsy paper bridge after her outburst, yet it was all she could muster. Thomas, face still flushed, regarded the plane with suspicion. His lip quivered. This wasn't what he'd anticipated. Some reaction, yes, but not this delicate olive branch. He remained mute, arms stubbornly crossed. A lump formed in Flora's throat. It's a plane? For flying. She nudged it gently towards his legs. My abuela and I used to make these. He didn't take it. His gaze, brimming with unshed tears, flickered between the paper craft and her face, searching for something. Honesty? A trick? The silence deepened, thick and oppressive, amplifying the drone of the engines. She felt the laser focus of other passengers boring into her. Finally, after an agonizing pause, his arms unfolded, one small hand tentatively reaching for the airplane. The juice residue left faint marks on the white surface. He held it, as if handling a live thing. Flora's breath caught in her chest. "Try tossing it," she murmured, offering a tentative smile. Like so. She demonstrated the launch, her hand arcing through the air. Hesitantly, Thomas copied her. He gripped the plane awkwardly, brow knit in concentration. Then, with a small grunt, sent it sailing. It veered off course almost immediately, plummeting to the carpet just yards away. A faint smile played on his lips. He scrambled after it, retrieving the wrinkled paper. He looked up, a question in his gaze. "Again," she urged, some of the tension easing. "A bit more oomph this time." He obeyed. And again, each attempt a little stronger, a little truer. The paper airplane became a conduit, a fragile connection forming between them. With each launch, the rigidity in his small frame softened, his cries replaced by puffs of exertion and the occasional giggle as the plane glided, however briefly, through the cabin. Flora found herself instinctively coaching, adjusting his grip, smoothing a wing. The world narrowed, all attention focused on their shared endeavor. Then a shadow loomed. An impeccably dressed man stood at the periphery of their impromptu playground, his features a rigid mask of suppressed fury. The air crackled with barely contained rage. An aura of command emanated from him, silencing the cabin's quiet hum. Flora recognized him from the SkyVista newsletter. Mr. Sterling. His tailored jacket hung open, hastily donned. "What precisely is happening here?" His voice, a low, dangerous rasp, sliced through the air. All movement ceased. Thomas froze, clutching the paper airplane, his eyes widening with renewed fear. Flora's stomach dropped. This was it. Career implosion. She straightened, meeting his icy stare, bracing herself for the coming storm. The mingled sense of expensive cologne and raw anger hung in the air. "Mr. Sterling, I can explain," she began, her voice a bare thread. He silenced her with a curt gesture. "Explain? Explain why my son is playing on the floor with you." His gaze softened as he looked at Thomas. "Thomas, are you all right? Did she do anything to you?" Thomas looked from his father to Flora, his face a study in confusion and anxiety. The fragile airplane trembled in his hand. The fragile piece had been shattered. A second chance. Flora spotted Mr. Sterling in the first-class lounge. The rigid set of his shoulders sent a shiver of apprehension through her. He was deep in a phone call, each curt syllable a testament to his focus. With a fortifying breath, she approached, the expensive carpet doing little to quiet the frantic drumbeat in her chest. "Mr. Sterling?" she ventured, her voice a bare thread. "I need to offer my sincerest apologies." He swiveled around, his eyes like polished obsidian. Fatigue etched subtle lines beside them, his jaw appearing even more taut than she recalled. "Ms. Hernandez," he acknowledged, his tone a measured pronouncement. "I understand that my behavior was inexcusable," she pressed on, her hands clasped tightly. "There's no justification for my actions, especially directed toward child." Panic seized me, and I reacted with utter unprofessionalism, something I deeply regret. Shame constricted her throat, choking off a sob. "I'll understand any further action you deem necessary. I take full responsibility." He scrutinized her, his expression an impenetrable mask. Silence hung heavy, broken only by the hushed hum of the ventilation system. Flora fought the urge to squirm, locking her gaze on his, hoping to convey the depth of her contrition. Just as her resolve began to crumble, a small voice chirped, "Daddy." Thomas, seemingly unscathed by the earlier ordeal, stood clutching a crumpled piece of paper. He waddled forward, his lower lip trembling, but his eyes alight with mischief. An almost imperceptible softening crossed Mr. Sterling's features. He knelt, meeting Thomas at his level. "What is it, buddy?" Thomas thrust the crumpled paper towards him. "Airplane. She make it. Fly good." Mr. Sterling carefully unfolded the paper airplane, a slight furrow creasing his brow. The design was simple, clearly made under pressure, yet the folds were crisp and deliberate. His gaze shifted from the plane to Flora, a flicker of something indecipherable in his eyes. "Ms. Hernandez made this for you?" he inquired gently. Thomas bobbed his head emphatically, the previous tantrum seemingly erased. "Uh-huh. After I yell." Mr. Sterling's obsidian gaze returned to Flora, the hardness receding, replaced by a complex brew of emotions. He rose, the paper airplane still clutched in his hand. "Ms. Hernandez," he said, his voice less severe, "while I cannot excuse your behavior, I do appreciate your apology and your honesty. And Thomas can be challenging." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. He possesses a certain dramatic flair. He sighed, raking a hand through his impeccably groomed hair. "I believe in second chances. I won't pursue this matter further." A wave of relief, so profound it almost brought her to her knees, washed over Flora. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," she breathed, her voice thick with gratitude. "Thank you. I won't disappoint you." He nodded sharply. "See to it that you don't. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to get back to my call." He tousled Thomas's hair. "Come on, sport. Let's find some cookies." As Mr. Sterling steered Thomas away, Flora drew a deep, steadying breath. The crushing weight on her chest dissipated, replaced by a surge of renewed purpose. A reprieve had been granted, an opportunity to redeem herself. She wouldn't squander it. Straightening her uniform, she returned to the galley, her steps brisker, her determination solidified. The remainder of the flight unfolded without incident. Flora carried out her duties with meticulous attention, her smile authentic, her service flawless. She made sure to be exceptionally attentive to all passengers, anticipating their needs before they spoke them. She sensed eyes upon her, felt the subtle undercurrents as passengers whispered and gestured. But she maintained her composure, meeting their stares with a calm professionalism she hadn't known she possessed. She was more than a single error in judgment. She was Flora Hernandez, a flight attendant, and capable at her job. She refused to allow a single moment of panic to define her. Given a second chance, she fully intended to seize it.